happened in 1983. It's never in the press, and yet the government at that point laid the foundation for what I consider to be the greatest fraud ever perpetrated against American people. What it was is that Reagan appointed Alan Greenspan in 1982 to head up what became known as the Greenspan Commission, and they were supposed to study the future solvency of Social Security and make recommendations. Well, they started looking, and they saw that in about 2010, when all these baby boomers started to retire, there was going to be a problem. There wouldn't be enough money to pay for them. So they decided that the way to do that was to get the baby boomers to prepay the cost of their benefits. Now, up until 1983, this is a crucial change in 83. Up until 1983, it was pay-as-you-go. Each generation paid for the previous generation or their parents' generation, and everything worked out very well. When they saw these baby boomers, they said, well, wait a minute. In addition to paying for your parents' generation, you're going to have to prepay your own money. And so there was a hefty hike in the payroll tax in 1983 that was designed to run surpluses for almost 30 years. And it has, in fact, to the tune of, right now there's supposed to be $2.7 trillion in the trust fund from those surpluses that were supposed to be coming in. Okay, the surpluses lasted until 2009 was the last surplus, and 2010, a little earlier than they had thought, we started running deficits. So in all those years, there was enough money come in to pay all the benefits plus a good bit to stash in the cookie jar. And they never stashed any of it.
Well, sound like a good plan that they were thinking forward how to address this great need coming up with the baby boomers, but they didn't put it into the fund. This is supposed to be a secured fund, right? And we heard a lot of talk back then, lockbox. We need a lockbox, but that lockbox never came. And as you point out, Alan, they put it in a general fund and they spent it on other things?
That's exactly what happened. The last week they were saying 2036, and now they're saying 2033. Yes. But there's nothing in there. There's not anything in there for 2012. And this is something that just is absolutely, it just drives me nuts, and the American people don't know it. So here's the problem, is there are no bonds. There's nothing but IOUs, which are nothing more than accounting entry as to how much money the Social Security has been spent by the government. It's a lot like, I like to use this analogy, suppose you have a rather polite bank robber, and when he gets all loaded up, he decides, these people are going to want to know how much I took. So he writes out a little note, and he says, okay, $10,500,000, that's what I took. Okay, that's the equivalent of what they're doing. These IOUs are nothing but a note or a record showing how much money was taken out of Social Security. There's never been any kind of arrangement made to repay it. And I've been for 12 years pushing and trying my best to get something done. And let me just point out that this is not something that just I discovered. This is something that was discovered by members of Congress back more than 20 years ago. And there was an effort on the part of a few senators, Senator Moynihan from New York, Senator Reed, and also Ernest Hollings from South Carolina. They got up there and they began giving speeches and so forth. I'm just going to give you a couple of quotes here. Right. Here's what Ernest Hollings said in 1989. This is on the Senate floor. He stood up on the Senate floor and said, the most reprehensible fraud in this great jambalaya of frauds is the systematic and total ransacking of the Social Security Trust Fund. In the next century, the American people will wake up to the reality that those IOUs in the trust fund vault are a 21st century version of Confederate banknotes. Now, wasn't he prophetic?
Yeah, and I imagine everybody else listening to him just kind of shrugged their shoulders saying,
they cut it off, and a year later, Senator Harry Reid, who lies to people all the time now and saying Social Security is in fine shape, he was honest back then, trying to do something about it. And I just got a little bit from his speech in 1990. He said, on that chart in red letters is what has been taking place here. Embezzlement. We have been stealing money from the Social Security recipients of this country. That's a direct quote from a speech on the Senate floor of Harry Reid.
Wow.
And on October 9th, 1990. All this was known then, but it wasn't a big deal because what they seemed to say, well, it'll be about 30 years